I think that we need more random guys in our lives, like this guy named Frank that I just met last week. I was going to pick up my kids at school, like I do every single day, and I get there an hour early because I got to be at the front of the car line because it gets a little bit chaotic and a little bit crazy. So I got to get in and out of there. So I'm there. I usually bring a book, and I sit on this little ledge right in front of the school, usually before nobody is there. And so I'm doing that this past week, and a guy walks past, and then he stops. He says hello, and then he takes a couple steps back, and he said, "Are you a dad?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a dad." He said, "Oh, great. I just want to give you this bracelet." And this is the bracelet right here. It says, "All dad, all day." And he had about 3 or 4 of them on. He took one off and he gave me the bracelet. And he said, "This is just my way of encouraging dads." And I said, "Man, it's a lot of dads that are picking up kids." And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I love seeing it. And so we talked for about 5 minutes. And he proceeded to tell me a story. And he said, there was a guy that I gave a bracelet to at my kid's previous school. And then after a little while, I didn't see him anymore. And I wondered what happened to him. And then one day I saw the news and I saw that he had been arrested. And it really troubled me. And so I wanted to try to find him. And I worked hard to try to find out where he was. And so I leaned into some relationships I had with law enforcement, and I was able to find him. And when I found him, I wrote him a 4-page letter. And in the letter, I talked to him about sports, and I talked to him about all the things that were happening in my life and just positive things. I said nothing about what he did because all he really needed was just some encouragement. And so I just encouraged him in the letter, and I pray for him every day. And we've exchanged a few letters since then. And I said, "Frank, I'm so encouraged by this. Like, I felt so boosted in that moment." You know how sometimes you're busy doing something and somebody wants to have a conversation with you. You're like, "Oh, Lord." But it was such a great moment, and I was interrupted in such a positive way. And I told Frank, I said, "I am personally very challenged and very inspired by what you said here today." And I was inspired because as a Jesus follower, it was a picture of how I'm supposed to show up every day. It's a picture of how I am supposed to engage in the world around me. And Frank reminded me of this, that I should be a light in a dark world. And I should be one who looks to encourage. That brings me to this letter that we're going to take a look at today in Hebrews. In this series that we've been in called COMMUNITAS, this is week number 4. And COMMUNITAS is this idea that is community beyond the surface. And I want to put the definition back up on the screen because I want to make sure that we understand what COMMUNITAS means. And we're going to talk about this every single week so that we get it in us. It is a fellowship of people who commit themselves to one another and gather in the context of an ordeal, a challenge, danger, or disorientation. When people like Frank do what they do, it is a little bit disorienting. It is a little bit outside of the norm and against the grain. But when we are engaged in this way, it provides a boost. And it was a boost for me in a time where I have a lot of things going on in my mind and in my heart. And there's a lot of things going on in the world, a lot of things happening around us. But it brings me to this letter in the New Testament, Hebrews, and it's written to Jewish Jesus followers. Now, we're not necessarily sure of who has written this letter, but we know the audience is to Jesus followers who happen to be Jewish. And it is a community of people who are facing persecution. A lot of things on their hearts and their minds, a lot of things that they are contending with in their environment. And it's possible that they could be thrown in jail for following Jesus. Now, that's a different level of inconvenience. We don't necessarily know what that is like. We can get up freely. We can come to a middle school, and there's no issue with us gathering and worshiping. But let me tell you, I went on a missions trip a few years back, and it was to Jos, Nigeria. Now, if you don't know anything about Jos, Nigeria, Jos is in the northern part of Nigeria, and Nigeria is kind of separate. In the south, it's very Christian. In the north, it is Muslim. But Jos is like right in the middle, which is the capital, and there's a lot of stuff going on. Well, let me tell you, I showed up to this church in Jos, and there were armed guards with assault rifles. That's a little different. All right? And you couldn't park close to the church. You had to park a little ways away in a parking lot, and you had to walk, and no bags were allowed in. You know why? Because a bomb had been detonated a couple of years ago in that church, blew out the back of the church. Now, that's a different kind of context when it comes to, coming to worship Jesus. If there was a reason to do online church, that might be one of them, right? But we don't know that kind of context. Like we have an opportunity that is unique and not the same in other places in the world. And so this kind of tension to the highest extent is what these Jesus followers were facing. And the intent of this letter, like the intent of many of the letters in the New Testament, was around encouragement and instruction. Encouragement to remain faithful and to be hopeful despite the hardship, despite the uncertainty. Why? Because the work that Jesus had done on the cross, the sacrifice that he made for us, is worthy of our devotion. And because of his sacrifice, we can show up boldly because we have been redeemed because of him. But here's the thing. We can't show up boldly on our own accord. We can't sustain that on our own. We maybe can sustain it for a little bit, but the point is that the community of faith has to be united in such a way that we can sustain it together, not me. See, I wore this shirt for you today. See, it said we, all right? We, not in our individual strength. We can support one another, we can inspire one another, and we can build one another up, but not in our own effort, in our individual effort, but in our collective effort. I want to look at two verses, two of my favorite verses in the New Testament as we continue this series that we've been in, COMMUNITAS, today, and we're going to extract a few things from there today. Here we go. Hebrews 10, verse 24. And let us consider or watch out for one another in order to provoke love and good works, not neglecting to gather together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Today, I just want to talk about how to be a we influencer. I told you I wore this shirt for you today, all right? How to be a we influencer. I think the biggest issue we have, or the biggest issues that we have, come down to how we think. It comes down to our mentality. And the dominant mindset in our world is all about me. Definitely not we. Or we'll think about we if me gets some benefit, right? But it's all about me and not we. And I see so much of this kind of like influencer behavior and influencer type stuff on social media and other platforms. And so much of the behavior is usually in two categories. It's usually in the category of tearing other people down, or just making it all about me, or both, right? And people are building entire platforms around tearing others down. And here's the thing. I wish that was just the case for people who say they don't follow Jesus. But unfortunately, there are those under the umbrella of Christian or Christianity, or they say they follow Jesus, who are some of the worst offenders at tearing others down. But we are called, as Jesus followers, we are called to a different standard, a higher standard. And the verses that we just read, it's clear that part of the call that we have is a communal call, to be communally minded. And at the beginning of chapter 10, which is the beginning of the closing of this letter, there is language that you will see there that is communal language. If you go back and you read it, words or phrases like let us, or there, or one another, we, together, our hearts, our bodies. And this language isn't just relegated to what we see in Hebrews, but it is throughout the New Testament. As a matter of fact, there are more than 50 one another verses within the New Testament. Why? Because the goal of following Jesus is not about your personal wins. It's not about your personal resume. It's not about your personal agenda. It's not even about just making your life better. This us, we idea is about intimate communion with God and one another for the renewal of the world, because we are on mission with Jesus to bring renewal to the world. Influencing the world around us brings glory to God and restoration to the world. Here's the thing, not just our world, not just our personal situation, not just our personal aspirations. And before you get upset with me, or let me just kind of speak to what you're saying in your mind, I'm not saying that your personal world isn't like, something that you shouldn't be focused on. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that your situation and all of those things that you're thinking about, you shouldn't have any concern about. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying those things shouldn't be primary or above our purpose in God. And so there are three things that I want to highlight for us in these two verses that we just read that I think is important for us to consider. Number one, the instruction here is for us to support one another, or to look out for one another. And this is really the antithesis of this me-centered, individualistic, me, myself, and our world that we live in. And as a result of all of this focus on us and I got to make this happen, and I got to do this thing, and I got to go over here, and it's all about me, me, me. You know, one of the downsides to that is we don't understand, or we don't build up a habit of seeking help. We don't even know how to ask for help. And help isn't a way of life because we don't live communally. We do everything and we approach everything by ourselves. When something happens, a lot of times we don't even think to reach out and ask until we have maxed out all of the other opportunities we can think of. And then we feel bad about asking for help. Like, help is a last resort for us. But when we look at the language here, this word consider, like it says here in verse 24, and let us consider. That word means to observe attentively, to fix one's eyes or mind upon. And the reason why this is important is the call is to take our focus off of us and consider, to be observant of what's happening around us and the people around us. But in order to do that, we can't be so self-absorbed. We can't be so focused on our world. And the reason why following Jesus is so radical is because we're called to a life that is other-oriented. Like literally our life is other oriented, is focusing on how we can be a support and benefiting others. Jesus said in John 10:10, I have come that you might have life and have it to the fullest. And we like, yes, Jesus, that's what I'm talking about. Give me that full life, all right? I need that. And we got an idea of what we think that is and what we think that entails. But what Jesus is really saying here is that when he says, I have come that you might have life and have it to the fullest, a life full of his spirit. But here's the thing. We can't have the full life that's full of his spirit if we are full of ourselves. That's how they work. So when we say, yes, Jesus, I want the full life, then he start working on us because he's trying to get us out of the way. We don't like that. That's a little bit uncomfortable. The other thing that we need to understand, too, is that life to the fullest is also this idea of the community of faith being connected to one another because the Spirit of God works through the people of God. I'm going to say that again. The Spirit of God is often at work in the people of God. But if we are disconnected from one another, then we are not experiencing God to the fullest. And let me just speak to this, because this is a real thing that I think that we need to contend with. Part of the reason why we can't really support one another, because I think like some of us hear this like, yes, support one another. Yes, I'm all for that. Absolutely, got to do that. But the practical reason why it's difficult for many of us is because we have no margin and our plates are too full. We have so many things going on, and we have filled our plates and we have filled our lives that we can't show up and we can't support, we can't be available. And sometimes if a half a domino is off, like the whole week is shot. And then our attitude is shot, and then like we mad, and then we can't recover. We have too many things going on. So for some of us, the practical step is I need to evaluate what I got going on. And I need to have more margin. I need to have more space. And this also contributes to our mental health and the mental health crisis that we are facing, because we spend so much time pursuing activity, all right, and not investing in community. When I say activity, I mean just like to-do list that never ends. Like it's just never ending, and we are so invested in pursuing that activity that we have no room for investing in community. But community is how we grow, is how we feel loved, is how we're supported. But we can't support if we're too consumed. And then we can't carry one another's burdens, which is another passage in the New Testament that we'll talk about next week. We can't do that if we are so consumed with what's going on with us. And followers of Jesus should be known as helpers and burden bearers. That's how we should be known. That's how we should show up. So number one, support one another. Look out for one another. The second one is we should spur one another on to love and good deeds. I love this one. So supporting and considering one another, think about this. When we support and we consider one another, it actually has a secondary effect to like encourage us to or push us to keep loving and doing good. It's like when I engaged with Frank, like I felt encouraged. I felt pushed that man, this is how I'm supposed to show up. Like I felt spurred on. And this is important. And let me just say one other thing too, that you know how we say, or we've heard this phrase, hurt people hurt people? Well, the opposite is true too. Helped people help people. Loved people love people. Healed people healed people. What am I saying? I'm saying that as we show up in the world and we're helping and we're healing and we're loving, we are also spurring one another on to show up the same way. Now, let me break this down real quick. The word spur here, it means to provoke. But what's interesting about this word is it means to incite or for there to be contention. And we only see the word, check this out, we only see the word twice in the New Testament. In Hebrews, which we're talking about right now, it's about encouragement. But then in Acts, it was about an argument. So two people were getting in an argument. So what we need to understand here is that, like, the word spur, it actually has two, it can impact us in a couple of different ways. Let me break it down even further. I find it interesting that the word spur is used here because it makes me think of horses, not because I ride horses. I have no idea what it means to ride horses. I've ridden a horse one time, but yeah, I don't have a history of riding horses, in case you were wondering about that. But as I did a little research, all right, I've come to understand a few things about spurs. Now, spurs would be like these little things on the back of the cowboy boots, and they have a little bit of sharpness to them, and you can, put it in the side of the horse. But here's the thing we need to understand about spurs. Three things. One, it's a refined communication tool for guidance and direction. It also means, or you have to apply the right kind of pressure with the spur. And here's the thing that we need to keep in mind. An incorrect use of a spur can create injury, fear, and maybe even trauma. So you use it for encouragement, right? But it also can be used to hurt. And here's the thing that I think we need to understand. Sometimes we need to understand that our words are important, and how we say what we say, it has an impact. It can be positive or it can be negative. And we have to choose our words wisely. And as followers of Jesus, we should also be known for both cheering, all right, and confronting, but confronting in love, all right? Because the spur is about giving guidance and direction. And sometimes to give guidance and direction, you got to confront. But there's a way to do that. And so the spurring one another on to love and good deeds is not just, I just got to show up and cheer everybody on. No, sometimes you have to pull some people to the side, and sometimes you have to confront, but there's a way to do it. And the purpose behind it is to spur on in love towards good deeds. And speaking of language, let me just give you this. In Ephesians 4:29, this is Paul writing to Jesus' followers in Ephesus. He says about our words, don't use foul or abusive language, but let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. So that means that how we use our words is important, and it should be an encouragement, even if it's a little uncomfortable in the moment. So number one, we are supporting one another, looking out. Number two, spurring one another on to love and good deeds. And then finally, we need to spend time gathering with one another. Because following Jesus is not a solo mission. You guys have heard me say this before. You see how we all gather here together in this room? And I love when we gather, and I know there are some who are missing, who are not with us, but I love it when I see all of you guys, and I'm getting to know many of you. I love when we get together, and we should absolutely be committed to this because it is significant. We corporately lift our voices and we worship. It creates an atmosphere that is sweet to God when we come together and when we worship, and God is glorified. And listen, when I grew up, they would say, God is glorified, the people are edified, and the devil is horrified. Some of y'all heard that before. But here's the thing. The downside to this is that just doing this, what we're doing right now, is not intimate. We need a level of intimacy that is important as well. That's why there's a different value we have when we gather together in smaller groups. Why do you think we have been promoting small groups this fall? Not just because, that's just something that we do. No, it's important because there's something that happens when you gather together with a smaller group. There's a level of intimacy that you can go to. There's a way you can be seen in a small group that you can't be seen in this room. There's also a way you can't hide in a small group too that you can in this room. Some of us can come in here, we can kind of sit in the back, we can say hello, slide out. But hey, when you're in a small group of people, that's a little bit different. Maybe why some of us ain't showing up in a small group, but that's a separate story. Can I just tell you this? Research says that the most significant impact on our health, yes, we need to have a good diet. Yes, we need to work out. Yes, we need to, make sure that, we're taking care of our mental health and all those sorts of things. But you know what it is? It's a commitment to community. Being in a loving and healthy and accepting community is the number one impact on our health. Number one. But here's the thing. We're in a world that's telling us we can do it ourselves. We don't need friends. We just need more money. Or we just need more influence. Or we just need a better job. Or we just need a bigger house. And all that's doing is putting more and more pressure on us because we got to sustain that. We got to carry that. When the real value is being connected. This is why the enemy, our adversary, from the very beginning, employed the strategy of division. From the very beginning, let me divide man from God and let me divide man from one another. And this is why we have the great commandment. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And the world that we're in is marketing the complete opposite. I love what Tyler Staton says here in his book, one of the best books that I have read. It's about the Holy Spirit, the familiar stranger. He says, what if the greatest obstacle to our formation isn't cultural clashes, ideological division, technology hacking our brains, or wealth stealing our affections? What if our greatest obstacle is the one the culture and the church jointly celebrates? Wanderlust. And you might not know what that word means, but it means the tendency to wander. The tendency to be disconnected. The tendency to say like, oh, I can go over here and do my thing and I can get all the value I need. I don't need anybody else. Oh, well, you know what? I know I only been in this job for 3 months, but like, let me hop over here and try to get this opportunity because I'm trying. And then we just hopping. All to pursue what we think is going to bring value to us when what we're doing is actually deforming ourselves. Is what we're doing. We're gaining the world and losing our soul is what we're doing. Let me see if I can land the plane for us like this. I want to just ask a very practical question. And I would love for you to just give me an honest response if you don't mind. So this is a little bit of audience participation here. How many of you regularly think and wonder, for those of us who are trying to follow Jesus and be a disciple of Jesus, how many of you regularly wonder, am I doing this right? Like, am I doing this the right way? Okay, I thought I was in the right room, all right? Am I doing this right? Am I making the right decisions? And all of that is normal. Doing the right things and making the right decisions is significantly important. We need to be focused on that. But I think we give more attention to doing the right things and making the right decisions when we should be giving more thought to, am I with the right people? Am I in the right community? Am I planted in the right environment? So, not am I doing the right things, which is activity, but am I being with the right people, which is community? And again, I just want to say it's not that the right things and the right activities is not important, but being with the right people and being in the right community is even more important because that's going to influence our activity. It's going to influence what we do and how we show up. So following Jesus looks like if people surrendered to him and committed to one another because of him. And as I've said already, we have a very shrewd enemy, an adversary, who's constantly telling us, you don't need them, you don't need that, you can do it yourself. That's why the African proverb says that if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with others. And just to dive into that just a little bit, the reason we don't love going with others is because we don't like how they move sometimes. Or they just a little slow, or they can't make up their mind, or and I see it all the time in leadership, and sometimes I have this tendency too. I'm just going to do it myself because I can do it faster. And then we just slowly burning ourselves out because we're doing it ourselves. And some of us are going to look back over our lives and see all of the things that we've accomplished and still be unfulfilled and fried at the same time. I want to give us some practical next steps for us, because that's what I want us to be a next steps church, and I want us to think about what it means to actively live these things out. Just 3 real quick. Number 1, I think we need to find a way to support someone this week. Find a way to create some margin to spur someone on by just offering them some support, even if it slightly inconveniences you. Number 2, make a note to encourage someone this week. Some of you right now need to take out your phone. You need to write a name down, all right? Or you need to put a reminder on your phone to send someone an encouraging message, a note, a voice memo. Hey, I didn't see you this week, or hey, I was thinking of you, or I know your son had that soccer game last week. Like, that's part of what the community of faith is supposed to do. We're supposed to model that. And then thirdly, schedule time to spend with someone this week. Like, don't neglect gathering together. Yes, gather here on the weekend, but gather together in smaller groups as well, or one-on-one. It's important. There's no greater value than feeling seen, heard, and loved. And this is what we're called to reflect in the world around us. This is how we show up as a we influencer. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you so much for this day. Thank you for this opportunity that you've given to us, this challenge, this specific challenge that you've given to us today. You have been challenging us in this series, COMMUNITAS, to show up and be committed to one another despite the ordeal or the disorientation and the challenge that we face, but to move beyond the surface level sameness that's just kind of easy to maintain. We don't have to really work too hard at it. But Lord, help us. Help us to be who you've called us to be. And help us to be like Frank, who sees someone and then doesn't see them and then pursues them just to tell them they're loved, just to give them encouragement. I'm inspired by that because that is what you have done for us. You loved us so much that you pursued us and continue to pursue us. Sent Jesus